Hi, it's Charles Kelly Money Tips. Now, I don't know about you, I don't have any pets as such. I don't know if you have pets, you have a dog or a cat or a rabbit or something. But if you don't have pets, if you're not a dog lover and a cat lover, how would you feel if someone was coming to stay with you and said, well, I've got my dog with me? And you said, well, I'm not sure, I don't really like dogs in the house. And they'd probably get offended. But how would you feel if they said, well, I've got a right to come in with my dog and you can't stop me? Well, that's what landlords are facing with this new renters reform bill coming through. It's been introduced into Parliament today. It's now a bill. So it's been introduced to Parliament, will be voted on and probably brought into law because the government has a massive majority anyway. And Labour are in support of many of the reforms that they want to bring in to help tenants, not landlords. This is tenants, right? Now, Labour would like to push it further, so they'll probably be looking at amendments to make it even more difficult for landlords. Now, one of the things that's been introduced is to enable people with dogs, tenants, to be able to get a place and for the landlords to not have the right to refuse somebody who has a pet in the house. And I think this is wrong because the last time I had a tenant with a pet in the house, they brought a cat in. Unbeknown to me, it wasn't part of my agreement. It said in the agreement, you're not allowed pets. But they had a cat in there. And when they left, the place in an almighty mess, part of the problem was this cat that they had in the room, and it stunk to high heaven. I mean, it was like stomach wrenching when you went in there because they didn't keep it clean. And I had to employ cleaners. That cost me about £200. It cost me about £300 to clear all of the rubbish and the dirt and the stuff out of that property. And so it cost me, around about £500 plus the loss of time I couldn't rent it out for, then plus redecoration in there as well. So I'm probably down about £1,000 because of these tenants. Now, what the government wants to do is to stop landlords having as much choice. They also want to stop the blanket ban on benefit tenants. These are people that claim benefits from the government and get their rent paid by the government. So some landlords don't mind this. They'll have properties in an area like places up north, for instance, where all of the streets are benefit tenants, and they're fine with that. They can cope with that. They can deal with the local authorities and the departments that pay the money. But if you're a landlord in the southeast with a let's say a nicer property, a more expensive property, you might say, well, no, I don't want benefit tenants. I would like to have private tenants. A, they pay more. B, they tend to look after the property better in general, okay? And C, that's just my philosophy. I want those sort of tenants. Now, the government is saying you can't have a blanket ban on this. Now, we don't know the detail of exactly how this will work. I'm sure the landlords will have some choice, but it's going to make things much more difficult. But the main thing in this renters reform bill is the abolition of the Section 21 right to evict for no fault evictions, it's called. A no fault eviction notice. In other words, a notice that you send to the tenant and it says, we're giving you 2 months notice. Now, you don't do that at the start of the tenancy, you do that at the end of the tenancy, or you might do it after a year or two if the tenant isn't paying any rents, or you want the property back, or you want to sell it. So I think landlords are perfectly within their rights for asking for their property back and shouldn't have to give a reason to justify why they would want their property back. I mean, do you agree with this? I mean, mention this in the comments if you think I'm wrong, or if you think, you're a tenant and all landlords are, fat cat rich people that, should be wiped off the planet. I mean, I get comments, things like property should not be used for business, it only should be used for residential purposes. Well, that's fine. Go and buy a property then, or let everyone buy a property. But as far as I know, there's always been a rental market going back thousands of years because not everyone either has the money to buy or wants to buy. Yeah, in a utopia, then everyone would, own nothing and be happy. But we're not living in communist society here, although I think it's moving towards that. But look, people have the right to do what they want, and I think landlords should have the right to say to a tenant, look, your tenants have come to an end. You haven't moved out, I notice, but I'm going to serve you with a Section 21. Now, the problem here is that a lot of tenants will not move out at the end of the tenancy. Like, if I go to a hotel for a week, I move out at the end. I don't say, well, you've got to serve me a notice to move out, otherwise I'm not going. No, you just move. But a lot of people won't do that. They're not reasonable. So you have to serve these notices on to get them out. And then when they get the notice, they say, the council, the local authority has advised me to stay put Otherwise, I'm intentionally making myself homeless, and therefore I will not be housed by them. So a lot of people stick it out until you go further and then send bailiffs in to actually evict them, which could take months and months and months. In that time, the tenant will probably not pay their rent anyway, and may end up trashing the place for good measure. So this is what people do. And until the councils get their heads around this and say, look, if people are moving out, they shouldn't treat them as intentionally making themselves homeless. They shouldn't have to force the tenant to go through an eviction process, an actual physical eviction process, before they'll help them. So that's my view on where this is going. Now, there was a charity quoted on the BBC, an animal charity, said, hopefully these rules will make more properties available for people with dogs and cats. And I'm thinking, no, it won't, because the landlords will just pull out. I'm not going to have my house full of dogs and cats. Sorry if you're a dog and a cat owner, but a lot of people don't keep their animals clean. The house smells afterwards. You've got dog hairs and cat hairs all over the place. And as I said, I had a very bad experience with a cat owner that just left an almighty mess and a stink. I don't know how they could live like that, to be honest. It was unbelievable. These were benefit tenants, by the way. And unfortunately, with some of the benefit tenants, you get a lower standard of behaviour in some cases. Now, I'm probably going to get barraged with complaints about this because not everyone is like that. But that's been my experience. More likely to have hassles and people with mental problems as well. A lot of people on the benefit system and in these housing situations are not getting the care they need in the community, and they've got issues, and that's not their fault. But as a landlord, you'd like to have a choice to say, well, I want this type of tenant without a dog or a cat, and that's my rule. This is my house. And then at the end of the tenancy, the landlord should have the right to say, well, actually, we'll come to the end now. Well, you've been here a year, you've been here 2 years. I would like the property back. Here's the notice. Now, I don't know why people cry about it, because when you enter into a tenancy, it's usually you sign a 6 or 12 month agreement. You're not signing an agreement for life, okay? So what's the problem? And these charities like Shelter say that landlords are causing homelessness. That they're responsible for people becoming homeless. Well, I don't believe that's true. It depends how you look at the figures. Because if a landlord says, well, your tenancy's come to an end and the tenant left, then the landlord is not making them homeless. But if the tenant says, well, I'm not moving until you make me homeless, then of course the figures will show that the landlord is making them homeless. So to me, the whole thing is a mess, and the government are not going to help, because more and more landlords will pull out. Hundreds of thousands of landlords have already pulled out in the last few years, thanks to George Osborne and his rules on taxation, getting rid of the tax benefits. Many of the tax benefits for landlords who've got the properties in their own name. If you'd like any advice on that, by the way, if you've got several properties stuck in your own name and you want to transfer them out into a company entity without paying capital gains tax or stamp duty, then there is a way around this. Contact me, charles@charleskelly.net, and I'll try and help you there. So that's what's happening with landlords. We've known about this for a little while. Obviously, I've talked about it and been writing about it for quite some time. But now it's coming to fruition. It's really here. And, Labour would like it to go further. One Labour politician said, this would be a good thing. It needs to go further to stop the Wild West of the private rented sector. Well, as far as I know, the Wild West didn't have so many regulations. They didn't have like dozens of regulations regulating everything you do, from gas safety checks to electrical checks to this rule to that rule. The boot is definitely on the tenant's foot here. And if the government empowers tenants anymore, then we're going to see more landlords pull out, and then it will be left to the corporates, and then they will charge what they like, I guess, and they will put up rents, and it will be bad news for everybody. Already we're seeing landlords pull out. That's why rents have rocketed in the last couple of years, and I think it will get worse as we go along. Now, of course, a lot of landlords are retiring, so it's not all because of the rules, but I do know lots of landlords that have either trimmed down their portfolio or have just sold off bits. And maybe keep one or two, but a lot of people are not buying. We know that mortgage lending has gone down substantially this year, so it's not looking good for this sector. Now, before I go, I wanted to also mention about overseas buyers. We hear a lot about overseas buyers, that they're buying all these properties in the UK and all this, but they make a very small minority of buyers, and they're normally buying in expensive parts of London and places like that. But there are mortgages available if you are an overseas person and you want to buy something in the UK. then there are mortgages available up to 75% loan to value for overseas buyers. One other thing I want to mention is if you need help with finances, and you need help in managing your money and putting money together so maybe you can buy a property in the future, then check out, I've got a webinar tonight at 8 p.m. Now if you missed this because you're not watching this today on a Wednesday, then I'll have one on the following Wednesday or the Wednesday after that. So do click on the link anyway and we'll get you on to the next one. But in this webinar I'll show you 3 steps to successful money management. First of all, to get control of your finances, get control of that money, so in a very simple way so that you can start building wealth. And then in the second part is to help you and show you ways of actually building wealth for yourself for the long term. And thirdly, then we're going to go through how you can maintain that consistency so that you build wealth over time. We all have the opportunity to build wealth. We're in a country where you can build as much wealth as you want, but it's just a question of how you do it, how you manage your money, and of course, your mindset. Okay, so do check that out on the link below, and hopefully I will see you there in my special webinar, absolutely free, 3 steps to successful money management. This is Charles Kelly Money Tips Podcast. I will see you again on the next broadcast. Thanks very much.